Hey everyone, Steve from Backcountry Gallery here. Thanks for stopping by and watching my video today. Now, today I want to talk about flare. Now, here's what happens. A lot of times you go out and you're trying to take a picture and the sun's in the photo. And you think, oh, well, I'll just put a lens hood on and no worries, I won't get any flare. Unfortunately, that doesn't always work, does it? What happens sometimes is you put the lens hood on and you still have flare. Now, I've come up with a real simple way to fix that I'm going to show you right now. Basically, it's a two-step technique. One we do out here in the field, and I'm going to show you that next, and then we're going to go to the computer and I'm going to show you how you actually put all this together in Photoshop. So you got a field technique, a Photoshop technique. Let's look at the field technique right now. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is I'm going to go ahead and just record this scene on video so that I can show it to you guys back on the computer so you can kind of see what I'm doing and see what I'm talking about. Basically what I would do is in a situation like this, I have a nice sunset, well, I have a sunset, and I'm getting some flare in here. Now, I have a lens hood on, it's not helping the situation at all. So what I would do is I would take my thumb and I give it the thumbs down, okay? Basically what I do is I just take my thumb and I put it over the sun. And then I would go ahead and I take a series of shots like this. And when I do that, it gets rid of the flare. The flare just goes away. Now, then after I get that shot, then I would take a series of the picture with the sun and with the flare and all that in there. And then I would combine those together in Photoshop. And I'm gonna have, when I do that, I'm gonna have a nice image that has the sun and no flare. And I'm gonna show you how to do that next. Okay guys, we're back at the office here, and in a few minutes I'm going to demonstrate how to get rid of the flare, but I have a couple things I want to talk to you about first. Number one is tripods. Make sure you're using one for this technique. You have to make sure that your images are going to line up perfectly in Photoshop, and it's just about impossible to do that handheld. So definitely in the field, use a tripod every single time without a doubt, and make sure it's a good one too. Number two, I'm not going to use the photo that we just did out in the field. Well, that's an okay photo for this. I want to show you what this technique can really do. So I've selected one that I did at the Grand Canyon earlier this year that just has a massive area that's totally messed up by flare. That's the one we're going to show you. And in fact, let's take a look at it now and we'll go ahead and get rid of that flare. Okay, so the first stop here is Lightroom. If you recall, out in the field we did some bracketing, and the reason for that is that we want to have two exposures, one with a flare and one without a flare, that are very, very close to each other. We want to select those two because that's what we want to work with. It's very critical that both of these are nearly identical, and not in just how bright they are, not just exposure, but we also want to make sure, you know, color, temperature, and contrast and all that stuff. So a lot of times what I'll do, and these two are actually real close, I don't have to do much, I tweaked them a little bit before the video, I'll admit it. But what I like to do is I like to look at the area where the flare is, and I like to focus on that when I'm doing my adjustments. So I might zoom into this area here, and then I might kind of get a neutral area that doesn't actually have like a hard flare on it, like this area right in through here where I'm circling with my mouse. And then I'll come over and I'll maybe adjust some temperature, and maybe I'll adjust the tint. I might adjust the exposure a little bit, and the contrast and shadows, highlights, all that kind of stuff, until I can go back and forth between these two images and see images that and see that they are very, very close to each other. And in this case, I'm going to zoom in. I'll show you. I have these actually pretty close. Again, here's that area, kind of neutral area. I'll let it render. And let me click this one, and you can see brightness-wise, it's very close. Color-wise, it's very close. This is going to give me a nice solid blend when I go into Photoshop. If I have one image that's way too bright, or I have one image that's way too dark, when I start doing my blending, it's going to be very obvious. You're going to see why here in a second. So now that we have these two matched, let's go into Photoshop and let me show you how to get rid of the flare. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop, and here's the image that we want to use. Now, a couple of things about this image real quick. This was actually a bracketed exposure. It was part of something that was going to be an exposure blend, but the following day I got a much, much nicer set of clouds and a much nicer image. However, what this does have is a massive flare, and you can see right here, this whole area is all messed up down here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on it just to show you here. But you can see we have this rainbow looking thing here, we have this big thing here, we have this double whatever it is, these little circles here. You have this over here even by this edge, and down here you can see there's kind of a greenish cast. All of this is caused by flare, and we're going to fix that right now. I'm going to show you how. Now, of course, when I was shooting this, I did notice that I was getting flare. So I used my thumbs down technique, and here's the photo I used that was about the same exposure where I did my thumbs down. All we're going to do is drag this one on top of this one and make some adjustments. So I'm going to take my little move tool right here, and we're going to drag this over to this tab here, to this photo. I'm going to hold my shift key down, and when I let go, it'll line them up perfectly. And that's really, really important. This is why you needed to use a tripod, so that when you make this move and you do this, the alignment comes right in and everything's perfect. If you don't use a tripod, it's going to be next to impossible to get these lined perfectly. So tripods. So the first thing we want to do, obviously here we have the thumb in it, we don't want this. And basically I just want this part mostly down here, maybe a little bit up here, but mostly down here. So I'm going to put a layer mask on this. I want a black layer mask. To do that, I'm going to hover over my layer mask button right here, and I'm going to hold my Alt key down, and I'm going to click. When I do that, I get a black layer mask, and basically, for those who don't know or aren't real familiar with layer masks, this hides everything on this layer. So now I'm only looking at my background layer again, because the black is hiding it. Now what I want to do is I want to let some of that background, or I'm sorry, some of this layer 1, I want to let some of that show through so I'm not looking at this flare. So basically, what I'm going to do is real simple. I'm going to take my brush tool, select that, make sure I have white set for my foreground color. I'm going to go up here to opacity, and I want to make sure that that's set all the way over at 100% for this. We're going to come down here, and my brush size is a little bit small, so I'm going to use my bracket key here to make that a little bit bigger, and make sure my layer mask is selected. Now I'm just going to paint white on that layer mask. But when I do that, I'm letting that image show through, and you can see what's happening. All of a sudden, all that nasty flare is getting taken away. It's coming right out of the photo. Just like that, all of that's fixed. Let's look at a quick before and after. Here's before, and you can see all the nasty flare, and there's after. It's completely fixed. Even this area here might need a little bit. But maybe I'm not completely satisfied with the way this looks. I'm not 100% there yet. I'm looking here, I love the way the sun's spilling over here, but maybe it's a little bit too much. I want maybe a little bit more clarity here. Now, if I just take this at 100% and wipe it with a brush, that is such a harsh transition, it just doesn't look right. What I want is just a little bit. So I'm actually going to set this all the way down. I'm going to go to my opacity, and I'm going to bring my brush all the way down to 10%, so that I can just add a little bit of clarity very gradually here until it looks the way I want. I just want a little bit more. That looks pretty good. And you can see, I'm going to do before and after. If you just look up in this area here, it does make a difference. It is a little bit sharper right in here now. Now, looking at this image, it's pretty much done. There is one more nitpicky thing. I'm going to show you this right here. If you notice right up here, we have this little spot here. Now, your instinct at this point is probably to hit your brush, go to 100%, and try to get rid of that. But let's see what happens when we do that. Unfortunately, you can see this leaves a very, very hard transition. You can tell something happened there. In this particular case, because this is so small, our best bet instead is to just put a new layer in and do a little cloning. So I have my clone tool, and I'm just going to come over here, and we're just going to clone right there. And now it looks great. I'm going to zoom back out, and you can see it. And here we go. And it looks pretty darn good now. I think this is something I can actually work with. Now let's take a look at, now this is what we started off with. You see all the flare here and here and here, and this whole area is kind of off, and this is not maybe as sharp as we want. Still have this, and just in a couple of minutes, we fixed it. Now I can tell you from experience that if I was to try to fix something like that in Photoshop, without having the second image that did not have the flare, it would be next to, at least for me, it would be next to impossible. And I think even someone who is really skilled with Photoshop would probably, it could take hours to fix something like that. With this, just a couple minutes. All right, so that's it. It's actually pretty easy, and honestly, it takes less time to do it than it does to explain it. So next time you're faced with a bunch of flare, give this a shot. You're going to really, really like it. Also, I want to thank you for stopping by and watching the video today. And if you're not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do so. I'd really appreciate it. And also, subscribe to my email newsletter, so every time one of these video tips comes out, you'll get an email telling you that it's there. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.